My talks at DevNexus, the Null Pointers performed at the JCP party, AI animals playing casino games, and the usual collection of silly tweets and toots. Welcome to Tales from the Jar Side. Welcome, my name's Ken Cousin. On the Tales from the Jar Side channel, we talk about the latest developments in IT, but with an eye toward letting you know what you need to know and what you don't, without any preconceived bias or anything like that. Let's take a look at the newsletter this week. So we start off as usual. Let's take a look at the subtitle first. It says, two big windmills are talking. One says to the other, "What kind of music do you like?" And the other responds, "I'm a giant metal fan." Yeah, I know. Terrible. Okay, moving on. Welcome, fellow jarheads, to the Tales from the Jar Side newsletter, the Cousin IT newsletter for the week of April 7th through 14th, 2024. I gave two talks at the DevNexus conference in Atlanta. I performed at the Java Community Process Party with the Null Pointers, the band of Java developers, so to speak, and gave my regular large-scale and open-source computing course at Trinity, but I did it remotely this time. Regular readers of and listeners to, and of course, video viewers of this newsletter are affectionately known as jarheads and are far more intelligent, sophisticated, and attractive than your average newsletter reader or listener or viewer. If you wish to become a jarhead, please subscribe using the button in the newsletter or subscribe using the button on the YouTube channel. Let's start off by talking about DevNexus. So DevNexus is one of the conferences that I try to go to even if I'm not speaking. That doesn't happen very often. Usually I am giving some talks, but last year I went just for fun because I never got my act together to submit any requests. So it's widely attended. It's in Atlanta every year. It's in the Georgia Congress Center, and there's a lot of people there who I really look forward to seeing. This year there were somewhere between 1,500 and 1,800 people. That's a bit smaller than pre-pandemic, but all the conferences are seeing attendance a little bit lower. But we're getting there. Here's a picture. I'm not good about taking pictures, but I did manage to get one picture at lunchtime. And there's in the caption here, I put in the list of people. There's Todd Ginsburg for one. Frank Greco is the head of the Null Pointers band, and he works in a lot of job-related topics, a lot of AI stuff these days. He's an expert in not generative AI, but rather predictive AI, which, as he was explaining to me, is quite different. But he does a lot of that. Bob Paulin is standing. He used to be the head of the Chicago area Java users group, and he does the Off Heat podcast along with Freddie Gimme on the other side here, who's also a member of the Null Pointers. Brian Sambaden, sitting here, works at Redis right now. He's a former No Fluff speaker. He's, as I mentioned, a one-man diversity initiative. I mean, the guy's got a heritage that includes probably more than 20 different countries. It's really rather extraordinary. I have my red shirt on, which I'll address in a moment. And then standing behind us is, let's see if I can say this right, Geertjan Vilanga, Geertjan Vilanga. It's Dutch. I'm probably getting it wrong, but I'm working on it. He works with the Tftjs.io people. Tftjs stands for Friends of OpenJDK. He wrote by far the best review ever of my Help Your Boss Help You book. Really good guy, not just for that, I mean for a lot of reasons. Anyway, they were all friends, and like Todd I've seen for years and years, and we'd never actually connected, even though we'd been in communication online all the time. So I put some of the summary here of the various people, but let's move on. The two talks I gave, one was called JUnit 5's Best Features, and that was kind of a fundamentals talk about JUnit 5, but there was rather receptive audience. It's a much larger audience than I expected, and they were really into it. And of course, I talked about things like the executable functional interface that the framework devised using assert all and assert throws and many other methods like that. The assumptions class, talked about parameterized tests with the various sources, even mentioned things like throwing supplier and throwing, which was the other one? Throwing supplier and throwing consumer, I believe. And there are a bunch of other small things that are really kind of neat. And if you didn't know about them, you might not use them at all. Well, if you didn't know about them, of course you won't use them. But now that you do know, hopefully you will. And when they start collecting slide decks and things like that, I'll put them online somewhere so that you can access them. The other talk I gave was the one on AI. Of course, there was a whole track on AI-related talks called Calling AI Tools from Java. And I did a lot of demos there, basically doing all sorts of things like doing chat and listing models and working with Spring and without Spring. And of course, one of the things I did is I used the DALL-E image generator. Now, I mentioned here I did some stuff with Claude 3, having Haiku write a haiku and Sonnet write a sonnet and Opus write an opus. And if you're a reader of this newsletter, you know about that because I've included them in the newsletter in the past. But I did have some fun with the image generators. This one was a response to the prompt, cats playing gin rummy, since, of course, dogs playing poker is a cliche at this point. The cards there, if you look a little too closely, have some issues with them, but, that could be the cats cheating. Who knows? I was a little bored on the plane, so I started having OpenAI generate some images for me, DALL-E in there, so I could share with my wife. This was one of horses playing Hold'em, going with the alliteration there, or rhinos playing roulette. Boy, they put a lot of rhinos in there, and there's quite a range of colors. I had no idea rhinos appeared in so many colors. Of course, I don't know if that's true or not. This one was platypuses playing poker again, and they basically look like platypuses, more or less. I mean, I don't know. I've never seen one live, I guess. And then I did, chickens playing casino games. So it was chickens on the slots for what it's worth. And my wife liked that one. It was funny, and there's a lot of color. It's fine. I'm leaving out a couple. I had like giraffes playing gin, and I had something else, but I'll spare you. At any rate, now about the Null Pointers, that's the band of Java developers, but most of the guys in the band, and actually some of the other people, most of the members of the band, I should say, are semi-professional musicians. Like Frank is a member of at least one other band that plays gigs on a regular basis. The drummer, Andy, is involved in many events. He's involved in 3 or 4 different bands there. What you can't really see is the bass player and his wife are both players. I think they were both playing bass at this, although one might have been on guitar and the other on bass. That's Paul and Gail Anderson, who are big on the Java FX specification. They do a lot of desktop Java, interesting stuff there. I wish I had an opportunity to learn more from them. They, of course, do these things together, and they've played in many bands as well. I think Freddie and I are probably the closest to amateurs. I'm out there as a singer, and of course, there was Brian Vermeer. I think I'm blocking him. He's like right behind me, and I should never have my picture taken when I'm standing sideways, should I? So, but at any rate, there it is, and I was wearing this same hat. So, oh no, I'm wearing a different hat today. This JVM hat, Java Virtual Machine, I picked up from the Azul Systems people. Azul makes a Java Virtual Machine, and it's one of the best, if not the best of all. So that was really nice of them. The party celebrated the 25th anniversary of the Java community process. Since I've been involved with Java, this is listed as 1998. I think I got involved in Java around 97, 96 even. Very early, version 1.0.6 or 7, although I didn't use it on a regular basis until a bit later than that. And of course, I've had sidetracks into other technologies. I've done a lot with Groovy, a lot with Kotlin, and so on. But Java was always my first major move into IT. So I really found that interesting. I say it looks like I bet my career on the right technology, and I still stand by that, but of course, I didn't bet my career on only that technology. It's just that's the one that has had the greatest life cycle. I still work with several others, of course. Okay, one other thing I wanted to mention as a side point, but gets back to some of the DevNexus stuff. The student newspaper at Trinity College in Hartford, where I teach one course a semester, one of their student reporters contacted me about doing an interview after I did a presentation there on managing your manager and some other issues. And I've been spending a lot of time talking about AI stuff as well. And that interview came out this week. I'm joining Trinity as a professor of practice this summer. So that'll be, quote, full time, although I'm going to do what we like to call on the No Fluff Tour pulling a Venkat, meaning I'm going to try to keep doing all this other stuff as well and see how that works out. At any rate, here's the article if you're interested. So gives insight on AI and emerging technologies. And that's an older picture, but it's a really good one. I've always liked that one. That picture happened when I was at a Java 1 conference back in 2019. They had hired a professional photographer who was there to take pictures of anyone who was a Java champion or one of the Java user group leaders or a speaker, and I qualified on 2 out of the 3. So I just went there and had the picture taken, and that looks way better than I looked that day. I happened to be wandering around in basically a t-shirt. Well, it's more of a t-shirt. I guess more of a long sleeve t-shirt for the Golden State Warriors. It was my Steph Curry shirt. And you can't tell that because it kind of cropped it out, but that's the idea. That went over pretty well in San Francisco. Just to prove I had hair at one time, and certainly a lot more than I have now, this is an old picture with my wife and my son. That we're guessing he was probably around 4 years old in that picture, although it's kind of hard to tell. So that would put it somewhere around 1996, so not quite 20 years old, about 18, I guess. So he's in his early 30s now. So anyway, maybe he was 6. I don't know. No, I think he'd be about 4. Anyway, as for the article, I ran it through GPT-4 to get a summary, and you could take a look if you're interested, but I'm not going to dwell on that now. I mean, it's interesting. A couple other points. My wife came with me to Atlanta to DevNexus. She wasn't going to the conference, but one of the wives of the speakers that I know lives there, and she is good friends with her, and another speaker brought his wife along. So while we were at the conference, the 3 wives were all getting together and doing craft-related stuff. Any of that stuff. They were having a lot of fun. My wife really enjoyed it, so that was interesting. She did attend the party with the Null Pointers playing, and she was kind. She would have said we were horrible if we were horrible. She didn't say that we were bad, and I tried not to push too hard because I don't know that I really want to know. I heard a couple of quick recordings, but the recordings were made on cell phones, and it's the sound's a little dicey, and they're just snippets. So I didn't include any of that in the newsletter, but it's around if you're interested. Another thing I did while I was down there is I've been spending a little time in what they call a YouTube Accelerator program that's hosted by Ali Abdal. He's got like 5 million Twitter or YouTube followers, rather, YouTube subscribers, and he has his own accelerator program, and I'm doing parts of it. I haven't spent the time I'd like to spend on it. Hopefully this summer I'll spend more time. But every couple of weeks I meet with a representative, and my representative happens to be Natalie Lazo. At any rate, she has her own YouTube channel. She lives in the Atlanta area, so we finally managed to meet in person for lunch. And that was pretty fun on Friday. And I can't believe I forgot to get a picture. But actually, of course I can believe that. I'm terrible about that. The other person that I mentioned was in that picture was Brian Samboden. And Brian works for Redis. You may recall in an issue of the newsletter a couple of weeks ago, I've got it linked here, that Redis changed their open source license to have both a source available and a source not available license. And this was directed at places like Amazon, who have a habit of wrapping open source systems in their own service and then charging their customers for them as a value added, which goes against the entire spirit of all of this. When I talked to him about the change in the license, which of course caused lots of chaos in the open source world, he kind of downplayed it, that, yeah, it's just what MongoDB did. It's not that big a deal. And maybe that's true. But of course, several forks have sprung up, and we'll see how they do. So I don't know. But it was interesting to run into him after all that. Let's go to the tweets and toots. So this week, I've got this little funny one I liked here, the croc carrying a croc. Look how instinctively the mother croc carries the baby in its mouth. Nature is beautiful. Yes. I've never actually worn Crocs. I mean, I hear they're incredibly comfortable, but I haven't tried them before. I know they have a mixed reputation, I should say, to be generous about it. Now, of course, there were lots and lots of posts about the Eclipse this week. I didn't get to see much of it. I mean, we had it as somewhere between 70 and 80% totality, maybe 90 even. But as this XKCD cartoon points out, it's either total or it's not. Or it's nothing. You know, this cartoon says how a solar eclipse looks, and I clicked on it, so this is the actual cartoon itself on xkcd.com. And by position along the path, you got the partial eclipse zone and then this narrow little path of totality where the coolness level skyrockets. And then over here, it's a couple of people saying, we should have a pretty good view here. We're pretty close to the middle of the path. Yeah, this map says the sun will be 91% eclipsed. And it's like, yes, so. The mouse over says a partial eclipse is like a cool sunset. A total eclipse is like someone broke the sky. And yeah, that is what I understand. Okay, so I did collect some of the gags. This one from the Oklahoma Department of Wildlife Conservation said, do not look at it directly without proper eye protection. Doing so would cause serious pain and possible damage to the retinas. And of course, it's using the movie from the Twilight series there. Lots of government agencies have Twitter accounts. Many of them try to be clever. Only a few succeed. And here's another one. The NASA Moon Twitter account said, oops, I did it again. And of course, what they're showing is that they blocked NASA's sun, because of course they did. Very good. Nicely done. I think you can unblock them now. I don't know if they just kept them blocked for the roughly 6 minutes to 20 minutes, depending on how you measure it. You know, that was relevant for that. Of course, there was a resurgence in Bonnie Tyler's Total Eclipse of the Heart, which apparently reached #1 on the US iTunes chart. I didn't check that, but I had no reason to doubt it. I remember that song when it came out, which was in 1983, and it was so constantly overplayed. I was never that wild about it anyway, and now it's, you know, I'm still tired of it. Even, what is that? How many years is that? 93, 2003, 2013. That's 40 years? Oh, my. Yeah. Okay, but I've had enough of that. I like this one. I was conditioned as a young theater kid to expect a man-eating plant to appear anytime there's a total eclipse of the sun. Audrey 2, as we say, from Little Shop of Horrors. Of course, when Audrey 2 appeared, it was just a tiny little plant, and it took a while of being fed blood and other things, you know, must be fresh and all that, before it grew into the full size and they had to try to kill it and all of that. And at any rate, the great duet in that is Suddenly Seymour. There's a lot of good music in that. That's one of those weird movies that started out as I think it started as a bad movie and then became a play and then became a movie again. And it just lots of cycles through that. A musical, you know. Of course, this brought back many memories. Eclipse 3.2, good old Eclipse back when they still called it by moons of Jupiter. I remember Eclipse was... Right. They did Europa and Ganymede and Callisto, and they were going to do Io, and they realized at the time that Io looked too much like either input-output or 10. They didn't want either association. So what they wound up doing is they went to Eclipse Galileo, as I recall. Right, it was Galileo. And then they started going alphabetical. There was Helios and Indigo, which of course is an I. I mean, that's not astronomical anymore. And Kepler, back to astronomical. And then a few others. And eventually, after Luna, I think they gave up on the titles. Yeah, here's the Wikipedia page. So they didn't have a name until 3.2, and that was Callisto. Europa, Ganymede, Galileo, and Helios, and Indigo I mentioned. Juno was J, Kepler, Luna, right? Then Mars and Neon. That was like, wait a minute, you're messing it up now. Oxygen and Photon. And then that's when they gave up and just started going with the dates. And I believe they're continuing to this day. They're up to 2024-06. I mean, I don't use it anymore unless a client uses it. I have trouble with it running on a Mac. I mean, it seems to run okay on a Mac. It's Spring Tools that has trouble running on the Mac. But it's still around. I just don't use it so much anymore. But yeah, of course, we had to deal with Eclipse. Now, I remember at the time there was some controversy that when they released the Eclipse IDE, it was not pure Java, even though it was probably the most widely adopted desktop Java application of all. It used native widgets, something called the standard or the software window toolkit, SWT, the standard window widget toolkit. And that meant it looked good on most installations, but you had to have a particular installation for your platform, as opposed to the Java IDE back then, which would have been in Swing or even AWT earlier, meaning it would look equally bad on all platforms. Nowadays, of course, you do it in Java FX if you had to do it at all. I wonder if they've switched to that by now. At any rate, the argument of why Sun did not join the Eclipse consortium back then was because they didn't make it pure Java. But it wasn't until later I learned that the Sun people were upset because they saw a relationship between the word Eclipse and the word Sun, which of course IBM, the head of the Eclipse Foundation, denied, and they always denied was intentional, but I don't think anybody believed them. The last one here is, of course, Pippin hanging on to the Palantir, me staring directly at an Eclipse with no glasses like a fool of a toque. Yes, of course. That's pretty good. Yeah, not the best idea. And John Scalzi also tends to be, snarky. And he said, condolences to those who expected to be raptured yesterday who ended up having to go to work today. That's rough, buddy. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. Moving on, the Yukon men won their back-to-back title. They looked kind of shaky at the beginning. It wasn't them playing badly. It was that, Zach Edey looked really, really good for Purdue. But they got that under control and got better and better as the game went on, wound up winning by 15, as you can see here. And that was their closest game of the tournament, I think. Although they might have won the semifinal by 14. But regardless, it was double digits, just like last year. So good. I love this little figure, however, that was posted about Caitlin Clark. This is, let's see if I can make that bigger. This is points versus assists for every woman in Division I college hoops. And this is how they scored. And way out here, this green dot, that's Caitlin Clark. I mean, that's over 1,200 and 350, right around 350 in the assists. So it's closer to 1,250, actually. And, the average is way down here. And you find it's difficult finding any outliers even coming close. That really brings it home how much of an outlier she was this year. Rather extraordinary. Then here I'll put in, the last one was he lied on his resume, but he got the job anyway. So there's the security dog, which is actually a cat. As I say, dress for the job you want. Hope you enjoyed all that. This week I've got a week at home, but I've got my Upgrade to Modern Java course and my regular class at Trinity College. But next week I will be in India all week for the great International Developer Summit known as GIDS. That's going to be a big event, and I've got a lot of preparation still to make for that. Okay, hope you had a good time, and I will see you next week.
Hey there, it's time to tune in to Tales from the Jar, so let's begin. Java coming in spring, oh my. Groovy Gradle, don't be shy. Tales from the Jar side, oh yeah. Crack open the code, let's take a ride. From design patterns to the latest trends, your weekly tech toast that never ends.